Hey guys, Constance here. Welcome back to A Good Life Farm. So it is time for the weekly garden tour. We weren't supposed to get rain, but it is really looking like it's about to. So hopefully we don't get rained out. Otherwise I may end up having to cut this video a little bit short today. So the garden is starting to fill out. It's starting to look like a garden here. And so I've had a bunch of company coming over the last several days, getting tours of the garden, getting tomato plants from me, and it's been lovely being able to walk them through. So let's go for a walk. So first I wanted to show you this right here. This is a new addition that went in yesterday, actually. One of the people who came to get some tomato plants from me brought me a gift. They brought me some loofah gourds that they had already started, and I've grown loofah gourds the past 2 years. It has a tendency to grow like crazy. I mean, think kudzu. It's just insanity. Tries to take over everything. And so I had decided that the next time I grew it, I would give it its own space. So I created these little beds on either side, put in an arched trellis. And I was driving by the antique store the other day, the one that I go by most often, and they had this yard set out here, and I thought, you know what, that's perfect. It was a good price. The table was a little bit bent, which is probably why I got it for such a good price, but it's not bad, and it's totally still usable. And so as the loofah grows up, and fingers crossed that it does great, this will be the perfect place to have a little shade, sit down, have some coffee all throughout the summer, because loofah grows all summer long. Another new addition is another bed. I mentioned in a video earlier this week that I was going to be putting in another bed since I had so many extra plants. I figured why not throw together another raised bed and use some of those tomato plants, which you can see down there. I've got 10 tomato plants. I've also got a few cosmos over there in a pot, but this will be getting planted this week. So the plan is to kind of configure this one like that new bed that is out in the big garden, where I have 3 rows. I've got the 2 cattle panels with tomatoes on either side, and then some flowers down the center. And so that's what I plan on doing with this one as well. Alright, so this is the same type of raised bed. This is one that got put in last year. And while this one is also tomatoes, I didn't do this in the 2 cattle panel design because I've got herbs going around the tomato plants. Also some sunflowers and a few other flowers. I've got some lantanas down here, as well as some cosmos that I just stuck in there. But we're starting to get lots and lots of tomato blossoms. I think almost every tomato plant that I did in my first planting has got tomato blossoms on them. I think maybe that one over there is the only one that doesn't have full-on blossoms, but it does have buds. So this week I noticed that my parsley has actually gone to flower, and this is the first time I've actually had parsley get to this point, because as I have shared in some other videos, usually the swallowtail butterfly caterpillars devour all of my parsley. I've never actually been able to get parsley to this point, and I think this might be because of the heat. It seems to me that it tends to go to flower when it gets too hot. It is related to carrots, and so I think that's why that does that. I mean, it actually kind of looks like carrot flowers, doesn't it? Alright, so down here in my big bed, everything is starting to fill in. My herbs are doing really well. My basil is getting bigger. I went ahead and stuck some Valuetta cosmos in this spot right down here because I didn't really have anything in it. And then my Momola basil down here is coming up and looking pretty good. Over here in this bed, I went ahead and I actually pulled out most of the lettuce that had gone to flower. I wanted to make space for some other things. I did leave some lettuce right down here on the end, and I'm letting it go to flower so that I can collect seeds. You know, my friend who was over today, we got to talking, and one of the things that I really want to try to do this year is share the process of collecting seeds from things that grow in the garden. You know, there's ways to propagate just about everything that you grow. You just have to know how to do it. The technique is going to be different depending on the plant, but whether it's collecting seeds or it's taking cuttings, root cuttings, plant cuttings, there's always a way to propagate them. And so I really want to try and share more of that information this year and provide that to you so that you know once you grow something, how you can keep on growing it without necessarily needing to buy more seeds every year. Alright, so right here, this is my cucamelon. Mr. Smith actually asked me to grow this year. He wanted to give it a try. So I just have the one plant. I don't know if this is something that I maybe should have gotten more of. Not positive. I have zero experience growing cucamelons. But I do actually have cucamelons, little bitty babies, right there. They're kind of all over the place. And these cucumella plants remind me so much of English ivy. They're very delicate. I'm always afraid I'm going to break them every time I move them. Down in here, I planted some of the seeds that I had restarted indoors. I've got my cardinal basil here. This is Israeli melon. I'm gonna let this grow up this trellis that I have out here. That was one of the reasons I made space out here. I also put in some sages, which you can see the itty bitty little seedlings down there that have come up. And as I'm looking in here, I'm actually seeing some other I'm seeing some seedlings that clearly look like something that I planted, but I don't actually remember what I planted there. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see. And you'll notice that there are little white pellets all over the surface here, as well as some apple peels or apple chunk. I've talked previously about how slugs in the past have been a big problem. I have seen slugs in this bed. I haven't necessarily seen them in the other ones. However, I have seen a ton of roly-polies. And other than the birds, I think that the roly-polies could be one of the issues of why I've been losing seedlings. They come up and then they just vanish. So I don't know if it's the birds or the roly-polies. But I went ahead and I picked up a jug of Sluggo Plus. It is good for snails, slugs, and the plus is also good for roly-polies. It is safe for organic gardens, it's OMRI rated, and it's just one of those things. I tried using the apple wedges, and while I did get some snails on the apples, they really just seemed to be an ant magnet. And so even though I didn't have ants in these beds originally, after I put the apple chunks in there, I noticed a whole bunch of them. So I don't know that I'm going to keep trying this apple technique because I don't want to draw ants into my beds after I worked so hard to get rid of them from my beds. Hi, Nancy. Hi, buddy. So the first tomato plant to bear fruit is this Blue Beauty right here. You can see the lovely tomatoes. And I did want to point something out. This tomato right here, you see how oddly shaped that tomato is? This tomato came from what is called a fasciated blossom. And a fasciated blossom is essentially two or more blossoms that were fused together when they were starting to grow. And you can let the tomato grow, but what happens is it gets this really hard piece in there where it should be separated. There will be bits of the tomato that are normal and fine, but that area that is fused where it's two tomatoes becomes super hard and you can't really do anything with it. And so it's really just best to go ahead and remove those, and don't let the plant put energy into growing it when you want good tomatoes. So this right here is a normal blossom. You see it's got the one flower right here in the center with the circle of petals. But then you look up here and you can see this one. This is a fused blossom. I'm gonna go ahead and pluck that off. This blossom, you can see it's got many, many petals. It's not nice and round. It is more than one blossom fused together. And so if I let this flower grow, this blossom grow, it would turn into one of those weird shaped or cat-faced sort of tomatoes. And so if you see these, it is best to go ahead and just pluck those off. So when you're going through and you're inspecting your tomato plants and you're plucking off the suckers, it's a good idea to go ahead and inspect the blossoms as well, and just pluck off those fasciated blossoms when you see them. All right. Over in here, we've got more lovely herbs that are filling out and looking lovely. I did notice a nice little cluster of tomatoes right here. These are the black vernissage tomatoes. They are the saladette-sized striped tomatoes that Mr. Smith loves. And right down in here, between the wall of the raised bed and the daikon radishes, you'll see I've planted my cucumbers. This row right here on this trellis is the Chicago pickling cucumbers. And over here on the end, by this trellis, are the Armenian striped cucumbers. And these ones are a new one for me. I've never grown this variety, but I do enjoy growing different things every year and not always do the exact same thing. All right, so out here in the InGround Garden, my green beans are doing fantastic. These are the NT half runners. I have got vines that have come up that are as tall as me on here. One of the issues that I had last year was that I grew the green beans on horizontal cattle panels. It just was not enough vertical space for the beans. They needed more space. I had vines that had gone all the way up, wrapped around each other into like ropes, and were all the way back down to the ground. So that is why I did half cattle panels and put them up into a peak, giving them a good 8 feet of growing space, since this is a 16-foot cattle panel that's been cut in half. And so hopefully this will work a little bit better, because they definitely needed more space. And while I'm out here, I think I'm going to do my first harvest of the season. Because right down in here, we've got squash. So these are the first yellow crookneck squash of the season. So I think I will cook these up this weekend. I decided to add this lovely larkspur flower this week. Unfortunately, while I was in the process of planting it, I busted the stalk of flowers. And there's some new stalks coming up here, so I'm hoping that these ones get full-sized as well and produce those beautiful flowers. These ones are already starting to die off, so the color's not as lovely as it was. And I know it's not going to show up on camera, but the color of these things are just amazing. They're this bright neon blue and purple. Just gorgeous. My eggplant down here is the one thing that I have really been struggling with pests. The flea beetles have really done a number on it. However, all of the new growth, the new leaves are actually looking really good. And so I think I have the flea beetles on this eggplant under control for the most part. And you probably can't see it, but there is actually some little baby buds, I guess, for the eggplant to start to grow there. There's one over there too. As you can see, my big old volunteer sunflower that grew out here. I do have a volunteer sunflower in the raised bed garden as well, but I think we have officially reached at least 6 feet tall. I'm 5'4", and as you can see, this is a lot taller than I am. And I mentioned in another video this week that I don't know if this is going to end up being a lemon queen sunflower or a chocolate cherry. My chocolate cherries did actually get this tall, but I think I'm leaning towards lemon queen just because of how big this is getting. I did have lemon queens further down in this bed, but the chocolate cherries were right over there. And the size of the leaves, it seems to me that the chocolate cherry leaves weren't this big. Of course, I suppose it could maybe be a hybrid, because I did grow the Mongolian giants out here. So, I don't know, but it looks like it might be starting to form a head on top. Yep, there is a head on top, so I guess we'll find out soon what variety this is. This week I finished off planting this bed in here, and I don't know that you can see them, but there is sweet potato slips down through here. I planted the purple sweet potato slips that I started from a sweet potato and got them in the ground this week. I've got them right here next to the green beans, which will go up the trellis, so there should be plenty of room for these to spread out because sweet potatoes like a lot of space. Now this bed here behind me, you know, I tarped it off because I had shifted the entire bed over a little bit, or actually this way a little bit, I think. I tarp it off to basically kill off all of the plants underneath, just to kind of give myself a head start when I'm creating a new bed. And the plan was to potentially grow some corn over here. However, to grow corn, you do need a nutrient-rich soil, and all of my leftover compost is up by the road, or up by the end of the driveway, and our tractor is still in the shop. It's been over 2 months now. We're still waiting on a part. Yes. And to be honest, I just have not had the time to manually hand shovel loads and loads of compost. I'm hopeful that we get the tractor back and we can do a late summer round of sweet corn. We'll just have to play it by ear. No pun intended. Alright, so this bed here is the one where I did the 2 rows of tomatoes, the 2 cattle panels, and then I have some flowers going in the middle. Now, all of these went in the past week or so, and it was super, super hot, and of course there was a little bit of transplant shock. And you can see that some of the lower leaves are looking a little yellow, but all of the new growth that's on the top of the plant is nice and deep green. So I'm not too terribly concerned about these. As the tomato plants get bigger, I will prune off those bottom leaves anyways, and so it's nothing to really be too concerned about at this point. This bed over here is looking great as well. I went ahead and I put some purple basil in there with my tomato plants. Tomatoes and basil go well together. They are a companion plant couple, I guess you could say. And I went ahead and put a nice marigold in there as well. And of course all of these tomatoes, all of these plants just got put in, and so they're much further behind the ones that are out there. in the front garden. These are the ones that I restarted from seed, and that was a late round. And here is my squash bed. Look at this. Man. Oh, look. Oh, we've got the beginnings of some rampicante. Look at that. That's so exciting. So this one definitely vines a lot, and it's been able to come up the trellis here really easily. Look at those tendrils there. See that? The gold prize yellow squash in here is definitely catching up. Ever since I put the shade cloth on here and have been using that on sunny days, these have been doing much, much better. And they've actually almost caught up to the zucchini next to it, which was already doing really well. And speaking of zucchini, do you see what I see? Oh, look right there. There's our first zucchini coming along. So they're all looking great. Oh, and I see another zucchini down here. Right down there. Right down there. And I've also noticed that the nasturtium flowers are doing much better since I have added the shade cloth as well. So I am very, very relieved that the heat was the issue that we were having over here, and that I didn't have herbicide contamination with the straw or the soil or anything like that. Even if you're buying organic compost and organic soil, there is always a chance that it may actually get contaminated. I have seen that in the past. I know people who have had that happen with them. They've lost whole areas of garden beds before, and it's kind of devastating because it's hard to get something out of the soil once it's in it. And so the shade cloth has been helping, and like I said, I'm very relieved that that was the issue. So I did have somebody ask me a while back to do a tour of the flowers and share all of the flowers that I have growing in here in the garden. So I don't know if I will make that one of my weekly tours or if I will just put that in a different one. I'll probably make that its own video because it would probably end up being pretty long. I mean, I don't have a ton of flowers, but I do have a few, and so I will add that to my list. So that is it for today. Thanks for joining me here for another garden tour. If you are brand new here and you're just finding my channel, my name is Constance, and we live in Alabama, northern Alabama, Garden Zone 7B. I do at least 3 videos every week here on the channel, and you can find hundreds of recipes as well as many of these videos over on my website, which is cosmopolitancornbread.com. And to stay up to date on everything that I'm doing, the best way to do that is to sign up for my free email list, and you can find a link to that down below. So thanks for hanging out with me here in the garden. I will talk to you all next time.